Now, the first things we have to do if we're serious about helping boys grow into strong, capable men is to recognize something fundamental but often overlooked. Boys and girls develop on different timelines. Not better, not worse, different. In our rush to be fair, to treat everyone equally, we sometimes forget that fairness isn't always sameness. In fact, it's rarely sameness. Boys, especially through adolescence, tend to mature socially, emotionally, and cognitively at a different pace than girls. This is not a defect. It is not a failure. It is a natural biological reality, and one that carries enormous consequences for how we educate boys, how we mentor them, and ultimately how we prepare them for adulthood. Let's take education as the first example. If you look at almost any school system today, you'll see that girls are outperforming boys in many areas: reading, writing, graduation rates, college attendance. And yet, the structure of our educational system, a highly verbal, increasingly sedentary, and highly standardized, often fits better with the developmental arc of girls, especially in those critical early teen years. Boys, who might be a year or two behind in verbal fluency or emotional self-regulation, are immediately at a disadvantage, not because they are less capable in the long run, but because the system is calibrated to a different clock. Imagine being judged not by your potential, but by the speed at which you get there. That's what's happening to many boys right now, and the cost is high. Boys who feel behind academically often disengage, and once disengagement sets in, it feeds on itself. A boy who struggles in school doesn't just struggle with grades, he struggles with identity, with motivation, with his very sense of place in the world. If early adolescence feels like an endless series of defeats, it's no surprise that some boys eventually stop trying altogether. And it's not just education. Emotional maturity plays out differently too. Adolescent boys often find it harder to regulate emotions, to express themselves in socially acceptable ways, and to navigate complex social dynamics. They are more prone to impulsive behavior, more susceptible to peer pressure, and more likely to take physical risks. Again, not because they are broken or bad, but because that's part of the developmental package. Yet we tend to treat these challenges as moral failings rather than natural stages. We punish rather than support. We label rather than understand. And in doing so, we risk alienating the very boys we most need to reach. If we are impatient with their progress, if we constantly compare them unfavorably to their female peers, we're not motivating them, we're discouraging them, we're sending the message, intentionally or not, that they are inadequate, that they are somehow falling short of the human standard, when in reality they are simply walking a slightly longer road to the same destination. What should we do instead? First, we need a massive recalibration of our expectations. Not lower expectations, different ones. We should expect every boy to reach high standards eventually, but we must be more flexible, more patient about when and how they get there. Just as a good coach adjusts training to suit an athlete's readiness, so must educators, mentors, and parents adjust their support to match a boy's developmental stage. Practical steps are critical. For example, recognizing the advantages of redshirting boys, starting them a year later in school, can make a significant difference. A boy who begins kindergarten at 6 rather than 5 is on average more prepared socially and emotionally. He's less likely to be labeled as a troublemaker, more likely to succeed academically, and ultimately more likely to see himself as capable rather than incapable. In schools, we should also think about structuring curricula in ways that give boys more opportunities for hands-on learning, for movement, for practical application. The bias toward passive sit-down verbal tasks plays to the strengths of early developing girls, but not late developing boys. If we create environments where boys can learn actively through projects, through physical engagement, through real-world problem solving, we are not dumbing down education. We are recognizing that intelligence expresses itself in multiple forms and at different times. At home, it means resisting the urge to measure boys against the emotional sophistication of their sisters. A teenage boy who grunts a one-word answer is not necessarily emotionally stunted. He may simply be on a slower trajectory toward the ability to articulate feelings. Pushing too hard too soon can be counterproductive. The best approach is to maintain open doors, to model emotional literacy, and to trust that the boy will step through those doors in his own time. And in broader culture, it means shifting the narrative about boys and men, away from one of constant crisis or condemnation toward one of understanding and opportunity. It's easy to paint a bleak picture: falling college attendance, rising mental health struggles, loneliness, economic withdrawal. But framing boys only as problems to be solved rather than as potential to be nurtured is itself part of the problem. Boys hear this, they absorb it, and over time it diminishes their belief that they have something worthwhile to offer. Instead, we need a narrative that sees boys as works in progress, not finished failures. One that sees temporary immaturity not as evidence of permanent inadequacy, but as an expected chapter on the road to adulthood. If we are serious about helping boys become good men, we have to stop treating them like defective girls or failed men during the crucial years when they are neither. The stakes are high. Boys who feel chronically behind often give up, not just on school or work, but sometimes on life itself. Rates of male suicide, especially among young men, are tragically high. Mental health struggles among boys are often hidden under a veneer of anger, bravado, or withdrawal. And all too often, society only notices when it's too late. Prevention, not crisis response, has to be the goal. And prevention begins with respect. Respect for the boy's pace, respect for his developmental pathway, respect for the fact that turning boys into men requires patience, skill, and a willingness to see their strengths, their shortcomings. This isn't about making excuses for bad behavior. Boundaries matter, expectations matter, accountability matters, but these must be accompanied by empathy. Boys should be held to high standards, academic, emotional, moral, but the journey to meet those standards will not look exactly the same as it does for girls. And that's not only okay, it's normal. We have to do better at seeing boys for who they are, not who we wish they were. That is the starting point for turning boys into men, not by rushing them, not by shaming them, but by walking alongside them with understanding, challenge, and faith in who they are becoming. And when we do that, when we truly meet boys where they are and help them take those difficult steps forward, we don't just create better outcomes for them, we create stronger families, stronger communities, a stronger society. Because when boys are given the space and support to grow fully into themselves, they don't just become men, they become the kind of men the world most desperately needs. When we talk about turning boys into men today, we too often focus on what they must not become. We hear the warnings against toxic masculinity, against aggression, against entitlement. And while some of these warnings are entirely justified, there is indeed a need to reject harmful versions of manhood. The danger is that we leave an empty space behind. We take away the old script, but we fail to offer a new one. Boys are not just told to avoid being the bad man. They are too often left without any vision of what it means to be a good man. Without a positive aspiration to grow into, boys drift. Some withdraw, some act out, but many are left uncertain, unanchored. And what I want to suggest today is that turning boys into men in the modern world means not erasing manhood, but redefining carefully, thoughtfully, proudly. Masculinity is not and has never been a monolith. There are many ways to be a man. We should celebrate that, but the fundamental question remains: what do we hope our boys will become? If manhood simply becomes an outdated relic or a cause for shame, we leave boys with two terrible choices: reject their own identity or cling to the worst versions of it. Neither path leads to flourishing for them or for the society they will one day lead. We must offer boys a clear sense that manhood can be a force for good, that there is such a thing as good strength, good ambition, good leadership. These are qualities that have been admired for centuries because they are, when properly guided, essential for the building of families, communities, nations. We should not teach boys that strength is itself bad or that competitiveness must always be suspect. Instead, we should teach them that true strength is measured by service to others, and true competitiveness is about raising your game, not crushing your opponent. Ambition can be noble if it is directed toward meaningful ends and tempered by a sense of responsibility. This is not a call for a return to some 1950s caricature of masculinity. It is not about reviving outdated gender roles or insisting that every man must behave in exactly the same way. Rather, it is about acknowledging that boys are asking, consciously or unconsciously, for an answer to the question, what does it mean to be a man today? And they deserve an answer better than just don't be bad. We might think of the journey from boyhood to manhood as involving three key transformations. First, a shift from selfishness to responsibility. Second, a shift from impulsiveness to purpose. Third, a shift from insecurity to confidence. And in each case, the goal is not to suppress masculine tendencies, but to refine and direct them. Take strength, for example. Boys are often drawn to displays of strength, whether physical or emotional. If left unshaped, this can lead to bullying, dominance, or reckless risk-taking. But if we guide boys to understand that real strength is in self-control, in protecting others rather than harming them, we transform that natural inclination into something truly admirable. A boy who learns that his strength exists for the sake of service, who knows that being strong means standing up for the vulnerable, not exploiting them, is on the path to becoming a good man. Similarly, consider competitiveness. Boys often enjoy competition, from sports to games to academic challenges. Some view this as a flaw, as something to be eradicated. I would argue it should be cultivated, but carefully. Teach boys that competition is not about humiliation or destruction, but about bringing out the best in themselves and in others. Teach them to honor the worthy opponent, to strive for excellence, not at the expense of others, but alongside them. Healthy competition teaches perseverance, respect, and resilience. Then there is ambition, the drive to achieve, to build, to leave a mark. Again, this can be dangerous if untethered. Ambition without values becomes greed or tyranny, but ambition directed toward good ends, to provide for a family, to serve a community, to create beauty or advance knowledge, is one of the engines of human progress. Boys should be encouraged to be ambitious, but to ask themselves always, ambitious for what? Ambitious for whom? Of course, redefining manhood for the modern age does not mean denying vulnerability or ignoring emotional needs. If anything, it means the opposite. We must teach boys that part of strength is the ability to admit weakness, that part of courage is the willingness to seek help. The man who feels he must never ask for help is a man imprisoned by pride. True confidence, the kind we want our boys to grow into, allows for honesty about fears, doubts, and needs. It is not less masculine to seek connection, to build emotional bonds. It is, in fact, essential to a full and healthy life. One of the most powerful ways we communicate these values is through role models. Boys need to see men living out this vision of manhood. They need to see strength used with compassion, ambition channeled through responsibility, competition infused with respect. And they need to see that success is not measured solely by wealth, status, or power, but by character, by how a man treats those around him, especially when he has nothing to gain. We should remember that identity formation is not merely an intellectual exercise. Boys do not primarily learn from lectures, they learn from example. They need to see and feel what good manhood looks like. They absorb it from coaches, teachers, fathers, older brothers, mentors. They test it through trial and error. They internalize it when it is modeled consistently and when it is expected of them with love and firmness. The task before us is not a small one. We are asking boys to navigate a world that is often ambivalent, even hostile toward traditional concepts of masculinity, while at the same time still holding them to standards of maturity, leadership, and strength. This is not an easy needle to thread, but it is our responsibility as a society to help them thread it. We must equip boys with a sense of pride in who they are becoming, not shame. We must challenge them to rise, not to retreat. And we must celebrate openly and unashamedly the beauty of manhood at its best, a force for good in families, in communities, and in the broader world. The truth is that boys do not need less of manhood, they need more of the right kind. They need a vision of masculinity that lifts them up, that calls them to responsibility and purpose, that gives them a positive identity to grow into with pride, not guilt. In offering them that vision, we are not just helping them, we are helping ourselves. Because the kind of men they become will shape the kind of world we all share. If we can show our boys that to be a man is to live with strength, compassion, ambition, and integrity, then we are not just turning boys into men, we are turning them into the men we desperately need. When we talk about turning boys into men, there is a fundamental truth we cannot ignore. Boys need men. They need fathers. They need mentors. They need role models, not perfect ones, not flawless ones, but present ones, engaged ones, men who are willing to show up in the often messy, uncertain, beautiful process of growing up. For a long time, we have underestimated just how powerful male influence can be in the life of a boy. And let's be clear, this is not about biology alone. It's about the transmission of values, identity, confidence. It's about boys looking at men around them and seeing a future self that is achievable, admirable, and real. When boys don't have that, when they lack stable, positive male figures, we see the consequences ripple through every aspect of their lives, in education, in mental health, in relationships, and ultimately in their ability to step fully into adulthood. The presence of fathers in particular cannot be overstated. Study after study confirms that boys raised with involved fathers, whether biological fathers, stepfathers, adoptive fathers, or other father figures, fare better across virtually every measure we care about. They are more likely to stay in school, more likely to find employment, less likely to end up in trouble with the law. They're even healthier. It's not just about discipline or financial support, though those things matter. It's about the quiet day-to-day reinforcement of what it means to be a man in the world. It's about witnessing, responsibility, learning emotional regulation, and practicing resilience, not because someone gave a lecture about it, but because someone modeled it. Now, none of this should be heard as an indictment of single mothers. Quite the opposite. Single mothers are often heroic, doing the work of two in circumstances that can be extraordinarily difficult. But when we talk about boys and their journey into manhood, we have to be honest about what is missing when fathers are absent. We have to recognize that boys are not just small adults. They are social creatures wired for learning through imitation and connection. Without the right models, without the right guides, that learning process becomes harder, slower, more painful. It's not enough to simply have a man around either. It matters what kind of man he is. Boys are paying attention to everything. They notice how a man handles stress. They notice how he treats women, how he handles failure, how he approaches work. They are absorbing lessons about what is acceptable, what is admirable, what is expected. If the men in their lives are absent, emotionally distant, abusive, or checked out, boys are left adrift. They will find other models, often in the culture around them, and many of those models are destructive, hollow, or performative. Mentorship offers a powerful answer here. If a father isn't available, and sadly for many boys he isn't, then mentorship can fill some of that gap. Formal mentorship programs can change the trajectory of a boy's life. Informal mentorship, the coach who stays after practice to talk, the uncle who shows up to the school play, the neighbor who offers a summer job, can be just as impactful. What matters is the relationship, consistent, caring, and grounded in a vision of positive masculinity. One of the mistakes we sometimes make is assuming that boys don't want this kind of relationship, that they're too tough, too closed off, too rebellious to connect. But underneath the surface, most boys are desperate for guidance. They might not ask for it directly, might even push it away at first, but the need is there. It's the deep hunger for affirmation, for belonging, for someone to look them in the eye and say, I see who you are becoming and I believe in you. Too often we treat the challenges boys face as purely individual problems, laziness, immaturity, lack of ambition. We wag our fingers and tell them to man up without offering any scaffolding, any support. We expect boys to somehow bootstrap themselves into adulthood without a map, without a guide, without a tribe. No wonder so many of them get lost along the way. If we are serious about turning boys into men, we have to rebuild the relational ecosystems that boys need to thrive. That means valuing fatherhood, not just in private life, but as a matter of public importance. It means making it easier, not harder, for men to stay connected to their children, whether through reforms to family law, workplace flexibility, or cultural messaging that honors rather than diminishes the role of the father. It also means lifting up male mentors across every sector of society. In education, where male teachers are in short supply, especially in elementary and middle schools, in youth programs, where structured mentorship can be the bridge between risk and resilience, in faith communities, sports leagues, after-school initiatives. Anywhere boys gather, we need men who are willing to stand in the gap. And it's important to say that mentoring is not about lectures and life lessons delivered from a pedestal. It's about showing up, being present, listening more than talking. It's about modeling patience, responsibility, kindness, persistence. It's about the slow, sometimes imperceptible process of building trust day by day. There is also a healing dimension to this work. Many men today are themselves the sons of absent or distant fathers. They carry wounds they don't always know how to name, much less heal. And yet, by stepping into the role of mentor, by offering to a boy what they perhaps never received themselves, they can begin to break the cycle. They can transform pain into purpose. The work of turning boys into men is intergenerational work. It's slow, it's relational, and it's profoundly human. It doesn't happen through programs alone. It doesn't happen through slogans or policy papers. It happens in the ordinary, sacred spaces of everyday life, sitting in the bleachers at a game, fixing a car together, having an awkward but honest conversation after a mistake. It happens when a boy knows that a man sees him, cares about him, and expects something good from him. We can have all the right theories about education, economics, and opportunity, and those things matter enormously. But if boys are growing up disconnected from older men who love them, challenge them, and believe in them, we are trying to build a house without a foundation. The truth is, boys cannot become men alone. They never could, and they never should have to. One of the most crucial and often overlooked parts of turning boys into men in the modern world is creating real, tangible pathways into adulthood, particularly through meaningful work. Work is not just a source of income. It is a source of identity, purpose, structure, and dignity. And for young men especially, the journey into adulthood has always been closely tied to the ability to contribute, to provide, and to achieve independence through work. Yet today, many of those traditional pathways have narrowed or, in some cases, disappeared altogether. We've created a culture that insists, often quite bluntly, that the only road to success is through a 4-year college degree. We tell every young person, regardless of their strengths, interests, or circumstances, that higher education is the only ticket to a good life. And when boys, who might develop differently or have different aspirations, struggle to fit that mold, we too often label them as failures rather than asking whether the system itself is failing them. The truth is, many young men feel adrift because the bridge between boyhood and manhood that previous generations could rely on, the bridge built through apprenticeships, trade skills, early employment, and tangible achievements, has been allowed to crumble. Instead of multiple lanes leading into adulthood, we have narrowed it down to one, and that one lane is blocked for too many boys. If we are serious about helping boys become men, we must rebuild and widen those bridges. That means creating, promoting, and respecting a variety of routes into meaningful work. It means investing in vocational training, in technical education, in apprenticeships that are treated not as second-class options, but as equally honorable and valuable paths. A young man who becomes an electrician, a mechanic, a builder, a nurse, or a software technician is just as worthy of respect as one who dons a cap and gown. Work matters not just because it pays the bills, but because it teaches responsibility. It teaches self-regulation, discipline, perseverance. It connects young men to a broader society beyond themselves and gives them a role to play in building and maintaining the world around them. It is, in many ways, one of the most powerful rites of passage into manhood that our culture can offer. And yet, too often, the work that many young men might be well suited for is treated with condescension, if not outright disdain. We subtly suggest that manual labor, skilled trades, and non-academic professions are somehow less noble, less smart, less successful. That message is devastating. It leaves young men feeling not just unemployed or underemployed, but unvalued, invisible. When boys don't see a future where they can earn respect through honest work, they retreat, they check out. They find meaning elsewhere, sometimes in ways that are harmful to themselves or to others. We have to change that. We have to make it clear that there is honor in all work, that success comes in many forms. The dignity is not measured by how many degrees you have, but by how you show up for your family, your community, and yourself. We have to tell young men that it's okay to build things with your hands, to fix what is broken, to drive trucks, to wire buildings, to heal bodies, to code programs. All of these contributions matter deeply. We should also recognize that work is a foundation for so much more than individual achievement. Stable employment is closely tied to other milestones of adulthood, forming long-term relationships, becoming fathers, participating in civic life. A society that does not help its young men find work is a society that will struggle to maintain healthy families and communities. It is no accident that the areas of deepest male unemployment are also the areas where marriage rates are plummeting, child rearing is destabilized, and despair is rising. The connection is not just economic, it is profoundly social and emotional. If we really want to support boys on the journey to manhood, we have to treat their need for work as a need for meaning, belonging, and purpose. That means policymakers must get serious about supporting apprenticeships, technical colleges, and work-study programs. It means businesses must invest in young male talent, not just at the top of the academic pyramid, but across the spectrum of skills and abilities. It means educators must talk to boys, not only about college applications, but about careers, trades, entrepreneurship, and the many forms of success that life can offer. It also means, at a very personal level, that we must change the stories we tell. When we meet a young man who is fixing cars, we should praise his work ethic just as readily as we would praise an academic achievement. When we hear about someone going into construction, we should celebrate it with the same pride as we would a university admission. Every form of honest, skillful work deserves admiration. In the modern world, adulthood doesn't come automatically. It doesn't arrive with a birthday or a diploma. It is earned, often painfully, through struggle, through persistence, and through the willingness to contribute something meaningful to the lives of others. If we want boys to become men, we have to make sure they have the tools, the opportunities, and crucially, the societal respect to do so through their work. Because without real pathways into work, without tangible ways for young men to stake their claim in the world, all the advice, all the mentoring, all the aspirations we have for them will simply drift away. If we expect boys to rise, we must first offer them solid ground to stand on.